Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jay. This is Jay Medicine. Welcome to another video. I know I haven't had a video uploaded in a minute. It's been, I think, a few weeks. I've been super busy. I've been trying to plan out a place to move into at UVA. I've been dealing with finding a place. There were certain places that I wanted that got taken. So finally got that dealt with. Signed for a place yesterday. I'll show you that when I do move in there. Med school's coming up in 3 weeks now, so it's coming in hot and fast, but I'm super excited for it. But without further ado, let us get into this video. This is the most requested thing that I've gotten since I made this channel. Every single day someone DMs me, someone comments on my video, emails, pigeons sent to my house. Jay, how do I study for cars? Jay, how did you study for cars? Jay, what did you get on cars? Jay, what's your favorite car? What car do you drive? It's like cars just being thrown at me left, right, and people freak out about cars. And honestly, last year when I took the Mcat, freaked out about cars. And it makes a lot of sense because we spent 4 years studying the sciences, and then people throw critical analysis and reasoning, and we're like, what? What is this? But yeah, so I'm gonna throw a few things at you, a few tips that I used when I was studying for cars. Usually when I make a video, when it's MCAT related, when it's studying related, I usually do a little bit of research. I see what other people do, and I take the best of it and kind of compile it into a big set of just methods, and then I tell it to you. But for this video, I did absolutely no research because I wanted to tell you exactly how I studied for cars. Studying for cars is very subjective, so I didn't want to just like compile a set of things that you need to do. I kind of just wanted to tell you exactly how I did it. For those of you that are asking, my Mcat score was 517, that's 95th percentile. In the car section, I got a 129, that's 95th percentile. I'll put my Mcat score breakdown. I'll put like a screenshot of it up. But yeah, so when I was studying for cars, honestly, in the beginning, it was one of my worst sections. And the more I practiced, I realized that I was getting all the other sections right, but in the beginning, my car section was kind of weak. So I started doing certain things. I started incorporating certain methods into my studying, into my practice, and it helped a lot. So let's start with it. How do you study for the car section? How do you study for the car section? You don't study for the car section, actually. You practice for the car section. I think that's a differentiation that a lot of people need to make is you can't study for cars. There's no outside knowledge that you need to do well in the car section. There's nothing that you need to know, that you need to sit down and absorb. You can do well on cars without having any knowledge of the sciences, and that's what makes it so difficult because we spend so much time studying for the MCAT and studying science that we think that we can just like sit down and read a book or something or sit down and read material and become better at it, but you can't. You have to practice to do well in the car section. But with practice, there's different types of practice. People say practice makes perfect, but I don't think that's true. I think perfect practice makes perfect. So how do you study perfectly, or how do you practice perfectly? There are certain things that you need to do. The first, and I think this is very important, is you need to read actively when you're reading a passage. When you get into the car section of the MCAT, you've already taken the chemical and physical, the chemistry and physics section of the MCAT. You spend 95 minutes on it, you're starting to get a little bit tired, and now you're about to just read passages on passages, paragraphs on paragraphs, and you kind of don't want to do it. But that's literally the main point of the car section. They're testing not only how well you're able to analyze, but they're also testing your attention. If there's one person that English is their third language, but they're sitting there and they're reading actively and they're absorbing the information, they're gonna do better than someone where English is their native language, but they're just not absorbing the information. You have to read actively. If you're doing your rotations, third year of med school, and you've been working for 9 hours, and some patient walks in and he wants to tell you this 20-minute story, which all of the information is important, and he wants to tell you a story. You can't just sit there and yawn away and not listen to him because you're tired. You have to realize that every single sentence, every single paragraph in these passages is important in order for you to do well. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is to do well in cars, you know, they sit and they read the passage and then they get to the questions and then they're like, okay, now is the the make it or break it moment. If I do well in the questions, if I answer them properly, that's how I determine if I do well in the section. But that's not the case. Doing well does not start when the questions start. It starts with when you first read that first word in the passage. To do well, you have to read actively. That's where your score comes from. If you don't read actively, if you're not absorbing and you're not getting all the information, all the pertinent information that you need, then you're not going to do well on the questions regardless. So you doing well does not start when you hit that first question. You doing well is how well you're able to absorb and analyze and understand what's being thrown at you. And most of the time, just a side note, most of the time, and you're going to realize this, when these passages, they're not like the passages that we like to read, you know. It's not like some kind of you know, like modern science magazine where you're like analyzing something like that's very cool and that you're interested in. No, most of the time these are like super boring passages. These are things that you just literally do not want to read about. You know, it's super just blah, and it's just like super bland, and you don't want to read it, but that's literally the whole point, because they want to make it so that you're able to analyze things that you're not used to or that you're not comfortable with. And that's how they test whether you're able to, you know, not only passage-wise, but if someone's talking to you, are you able to understand them even when you don't want to, or when you think you don't have the time, or when you're kind of burnt out? You know, that's the whole reason they put that in there. So the first method is to read actively. The second method to use when you're practicing is to categorize each paragraph on paper. Now, when I was studying for the MCAT, I used the Kaplan books, and I read the Kaplan book for the cars, and there were a lot of things that I did not like. I think they were making it too complex, but there was a group of things that I did like, the methods that they wanted to teach. The most important one being categorizing your paragraphs. So when I was reading a cars passage, and I'll show you this on the video, I would make a list of each paragraph. So I put 1, 2, 3, 4, however many paragraphs. I would just read along and put the paragraph, and next to that number I would put a minus sign, a 0, a plus sign, and I would change how many minus signs, how many plus signs. So if it was 2 negatives or if it was 2 positives, it would have a different meaning. And what those symbolized were the connotation of each paragraph. So when an author was talking about, you know, any kind of subject, whether it was a policy he was talking about, or whether it was, you know, anything that the author's talking about, what kind of connotation does this paragraph have? Because a lot of times you're going to realize an author does not have a very like static stance on a certain subject. He'll start, you know, or she'll start, and he or she will have a certain view on a topic, and then you'll realize midway they'll kind of go to a different, you know, stance, and they'll kind of switch it up, and they'll use that to their advantage. So you wanna kind of jot this down quickly, okay? You don't want to like sit there and make an outline for the paper, because that's gonna waste a lot of time. You want to do this in a very quick way where you're not even like looking down at your paper. You're kind of just looking at the screen, you're reading, and, you know, to the side you're kind of making these numbers, and you're putting a plus, you're putting a minus, you're putting a 0, you're putting 2 pluses, and that kind of symbolizes what kind of connotation that author has for that specific paragraph. And the reason you do this is because one of the main things that you want to do when you're answering and when you're reading these cars passages is to gauge the author's tone, and not only the author's tone but their purpose. So when you're reading these passages, you don't want to take the stance of, you know, someone that's just sitting there and consuming what they're writing. The author is writing this, and they don't have to be right. It's not like they're coming to you and it's like, okay, you're my consumer, just read this and absorb it. No, your stance is that of, you know, you got to think of it as, you know, if you were like a publisher for a magazine, and then this author came to you and gave you this passage and said, okay, what do you think of this? And you're sitting there and you're kind of analyzing and judging them from a very objective point of view, and you're trying to decide whether they should be published or not. So your stance, if the author's here, you can't be reading it from a consumer like they're handing it down to you. No, you're up here. Okay, you're judging them, you're analyzing them, you got to be very critical, and, you know, you can't just take everything they say and pretend like they're perfect, because authors are not perfect. There's certain things that they'll do, or they'll say that, you know, they'll ask questions about, you know, in this paragraph, the author said this about this policy, but in this paragraph, he said this. Why did they make this change? What do you think of this? You know, you're not reading as a consumer, you're reading as a reviewer. So that's the stance that you want to take. You have to be very judgmental. You have to be very critical when you're reading these passages. And the last thing that you want to do is when you're actually answering the questions is to not let the tough questions get to you, okay? There was a quote, and it's a very important quote, and it's what makes you do badly on the MCAT is not the questions. They're not the questions that you miss. They're the questions that you spend way too much time on, because those are the ones that throw you off. Those are the ones that have an impact on the rest of your test. So when there's a question and you're sitting there and you've crossed out 2 of the answers and there's 2 left that you literally have no idea which one it is, just mark it down, come back to it, because there's going to be questions that are much easier that you don't want to miss because you're spending way too much time on this question. So read actively, categorize the paragraphs on paper, and try to do it kind of without looking down at the paper. Try to do it quickly and try to do it in a way where it doesn't take away from the time that you're spending reading the passage. Gauge the author's tone, and not only their tone but their purpose. Why are they making this passage? You know, is it informative? Are they trying to just inform you about something? Is it persuasive? Do they want you to change your mind? And if it's persuasive, what direction? What exactly is the author trying to do? These are the questions you need to be asking yourself while you're reading the passage and while you're taking down, making that quick outline. You need to be reviewing this as if you're above the author. Now, with all that being said, I need to kind of emphasize the fact that CARS is not something you study for, okay? It's something that you practice. I can't tell you that enough. You have to just keep practicing for CARS. Your first score for CARS section will probably not be good. If it's good, it's not going to be your best. You just keep practicing, you're going to get better. And this is something that I realized, this is something that everyone that took the MCAT that I've spoken to realizes. The more they practice, the more they figure out what their flaws are and fix that, the more perfect practice that they have, the better they get at it. So every time that you take these like section practice tests, or if you're taking a full length, realize what your problem is. Is your problem time? Are you running out of time? Do you find yourself doing really well in the first section, then you kind of start cramming because you realize you're running out of time, then you start doing badly? Or do you miss questions at the end because you don't have enough time? Or is it just that you do have enough time but you're getting the questions wrong? As soon as you realize what your problem is, you can fix it. So if time is your problem, there's one thing that a lot of people do. It's they go to the questions, they read the questions, and then they read the passage afterwards. I know this has cut down time for a lot of people that I've spoken to. I personally did not use this because time was not my issue. My issue in the beginning when I was studying for CARS was me getting the questions wrong. I really didn't, I wasn't able to gauge the author's tone, their purpose. I didn't really know what to look for. And the more I practiced, the more I knew what to look for in a passage. So that wasn't really my issue. So I never really looked at the questions first. I just learned how to read actively, take every sentence and not take anything for granted, and just absorb everything and analyze everything as I was reading it. But if time is your issue, then try reading the questions first, because maybe it'll give you a better understanding of what to look for. And maybe you'll be able to just kind of read the passage a little bit more quickly, still retain all the information, but you'll be able to know what exactly you're looking for. Maybe there's certain questions where the question comes up and you won't be in a situation where you have to go back to the passage. You already know what they're asking you. So try it out. The only way to know if something works for you is to try it out. If it helps, that's good. Run with it. If not, then realize what the issue is. If your issue is just getting the questions wrong, then maybe you need to just practice more and be better at gauging the author's tone. Take the exam. Look at the questions you got wrong. Look at the explanations. If you kind of underestimated or overestimated the author's tone or their purpose in a certain passage, why did you do that? How can you stop that in the future? And the more you practice, the more you're gonna realize your mistakes, the more you're gonna build on it. But yeah, that's generally how you do well on CARS. Literally, just practice. Use those methods that I told you. Perfect practice makes perfect. This is, I know a lot of people have either already taken the MCAT or are taking it very, very soon. And I know CARS is one of those sections where, people kind of, towards the end of their studying, they kind of try to work more on it because it's one of the hardest sections. So that's why I wanted to make this video today. With that being said, this is probably going to be one of the last, if not the last, MCAT videos that I'm going to make. Just because med school is just around the corner, and I kind of want this channel to move towards vlogging about med school, telling you guys what med school is like, how to deal with med school and stuff like that, and kind of move away from, how to get into med school. I'm still gonna probably drop a couple videos maybe in the future, but at least in the near future, might be one of the last, if not the last, MCAT videos that I'm gonna make. With that being said, good luck to everyone that's taking the MCAT. If you're taking it soon, take a deep breath when you walk into that room. Be confident in your answers. Be confident in everything that you do. You're gonna do well. Just stay calm. Stay relaxed. The day before your exam, just do something very relaxing. Hang out with your friends. Get a good night's rest. If you've already taken the MCAT, this month of waiting, it's no use for you to stress. So don't stress anything out. Again, just be confident. Be relaxed. And in the end, one way or another, just realize that you're gonna make it somehow. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Sorry for going MIA for a little bit. I'm gonna try my best not to do that. Now that I got my whole moving situation figured out, I'm probably gonna start making more videos. I think my next video might be my first day of med school, or me moving into my new place. Who knows? Stay tuned and you'll find out soon. Yeah, take care.